Welcome back to Skills Live. We're about to talk about relieving stress, and I've just received this memo here. April Fool's is usually a very big holiday here at the Center for Autism and Related Disorders because there's one person in particular that we've had on the show before. She is the mom of a son who recovered from autism, and she now runs the contract department. I won't mention any names, but her initials are Bryce Myler. And because April Fool's Day falls on a Sunday this year, in the past, this ex-autism mom usually booby traps our entire office. I was just saying to our technical director, because she wasn't here last year, that last year there were fake lizards and snakes left everywhere. There was fake dog poop in different offices. There were panic buttons glued to desks and computers, and phones that were jerry-rigged so that you would try to answer and it was still ringing. And in any case, she's sent out an email about a flyer, actually, about this year's April Fool's because it's happening on Sunday, and it's very funny. And this is a wonderful entree into the fact that we're going to talk about reducing stress, because how do we reduce stress? And part of it is not taking everything so painfully seriously. And this is a mom who got it done, right? She did years of ABA therapy with her son, and he recovered, and he's away at college. And when I've asked her before, how did you manage to do all this? Because I, want to follow in her footsteps, and she's very happy and happily married woman who has a wonderful sense of fun, and she always says, oh, we had a laugh. We had to laugh, right? So that's definitely something that we're going to be talking about as we talk about these 10 different ways to reduce stress. Right? So our first number one thing that we're going to talk about is that we need to remember to breathe. We need to remember to breathe. I mentioned that last week I was working on, I've been working for the last couple of months on a theater project with a group of fourth graders at a school, and we were at the day of the first two performances, and the one teacher said to me, "You're holding your breath, Shannon. You got to remember to breathe." And she was saying that somebody had pointed out to her that she holds her breath all the time. And we all will. We get stuck, we stop, and we hold our breath. So something that I've talked about before on the show is that no matter what's happening, if we can remember to take 3 slow inhales and exhales, it's always better after we've taken the 3 breaths. When you stop and think about it, I'm sure that some of you have been in dire emergencies before. Absolute real panic situations where something actually is happening right now that's, a tragedy, horrific, whatever it is, life and death moments. If you haven't been in those moments, I can tell you that when that happens, usually you don't panic during those moments. Those are not the moments in which you panic, and you don't hold your breath in those moments. You're moving and thinking and breathing, and your body just does things, right? But when it isn't a real panic situation, when it's something that just is causing those feelings, we hold our breath. And when we hold our breath, it sends the message to the brain. It usually starts with the breath. Sends the message to the brain, oxygen has been cut off, and that's when we start to panic. So if we can take 3 slow inhales and exhales, we are always better. Whether it's that your child is engaging in challenging behavior in front of a whole bunch of people, you're in the middle of a store, and your child's throwing a huge tantrum, take the breath. Take the breath. 3 big, you know what I'm talking about, to the bottom of your lungs. I had a voice teacher who used to say, breathe from your labanza, right? From the very bottom of your lungs, you want to take the big, slow breath, right? So that's something that we can do almost anywhere. 3 inhales, 3 exhales. And you can do it at almost any time. You can do it standing up. You can do it laying down. You can do it while you're driving. It doesn't cost you anything. Take the 3 breaths. Now, if you can work it out in your life, also the whole idea of doing yoga, which will help your body and will help you to breathe, that's a wonderful thing to do. You can find online, there are some free yoga lessons online. There are free yoga demonstrations on YouTube. Eventually they want you to buy the next one, but Do that with 5 or 6 of them that they're free, and you'll have a yoga program. You don't have to spend money to be able to do these things. You can look online and do some yoga. There's also something that I've been taught in recent years, breathing in 4, breathing in, breathing through your nose, and then exhaling, and that you can be tapping your fingers at the same time. I don't know why, but it helps to relieve stress. It also helps to clear your sinuses, all these benefits, right? So breathing has to be number 1, right? Because what happens if you don't breathe? Eventually you pass out. Eventually your body says, not participating with you on this. You cannot be in charge of this moment because you're not getting the breathing done. So we're taking over. It knocks you out, and then your body breathes again. We don't need to get to that point. But if you're feeling anxiety wherever you are, if you're feeling stress, stopping to take those 3 breaths. Okay, so breathing is key number 1 for reducing stress. Okay, number 2 is delegating. I know. Sometimes this is more stressful than anything else. But if you think to yourself, what is going on that only I can do? Because a lot of times we feel overwhelmed. I've shared with you before that at one point I had used the word overwhelmed so many times that I went, you know what? I'm not even sure that I'm using that word properly. I don't know that I've ever looked it up in the dictionary. I'm going to go look it up in the dictionary right now and see what it means. And literally it means underwater. That your head is underwater, which is exactly how I felt. I thought, what a great word. That's exactly how I feel, like my head is underwater. I've got too many things to do and my head is underwater. I've been consumed. But if you stop and think to yourself, okay, what can only I do? Well, you might be the only person who can get your child ready for school. But is that true? Is that absolutely true? Is there anybody else who could potentially get your child ready for school? And so if you start to think about it, what can only I do, and what is there the possibility that somebody else could do? And it's going to be different for all of us, right? I was on the phone with my mother this morning, and she said, I want to come and help you. I know you're so busy. I want to come and help you. And I said to her, I got to think this through, because there's probably some stuff that I don't need to be doing. Like, really, seriously? And my mother has pointed this out to me before. I don't have to be the person who does my own laundry. I like to do my own laundry because I have a way that I like to do my own laundry, and that's true. But do I actually need to do my own laundry? If my mom comes to stay with me and wants to do my laundry for me, could that potentially be something that is a stress reducer? It is potentially something that could be a stress reducer. So ask yourself, and we talked about this yesterday, about when you have your team of people, assembled your team of people, there are people who do want to help you, right? They may not want to come and do your laundry. But if there are some things that you can delegate to other people, if there are some things, if you're in a relationship with someone, a partner or spouse, and you're feeling like you've taken it all on, stop and consider, what can you delegate? In actuality, and think of it really as this 2-column thing. There are some things that only you can do, or some things that you are so much better at that it's better for you to do it, or that it would take you more time to explain to somebody else how to do it. Those things take on, but there are a whole host of things in your day that in actuality somebody else could do, and then start to ask yourself, so who can I pawn these things off on, right? And more often than not, there is somebody else that you can delegate to. And if you haven't gotten to the point, watch yesterday's show where we talked about this is a crisis. If your child has been diagnosed with autism and you're getting it together, it's a crisis, and it's a long-term crisis. You need to call in the troops and say, I need some help and support here. And get over the idea that you can do this by yourself. So you've got those people together if you watch yesterday's show, and now you need to figure out what you actually want to delegate to them. And stop and think about what would actually be helpful to you. Okay, think about other crisis situations. I have a friend who was diagnosed with cancer, and it was just a devastating thing for her family. And she had to, fortunately, she is totally fine now, went through her chemo just fine, has had no cancer in her body for years now, is considered completely recovered and cured from cancer. But I remember in those first days that it was like, okay, we have a crisis situation here. This mom mom of 3 kids who typically does all these things is going to have to undergo this 6 to 9 months of chemotherapy where she's going to be down a lot of times. So what are we going to do? And the troops rallied. And it was a period of time where they were figuring out, okay, what works, what doesn't work, because sometimes you can help somebody out and make it harder for them, right? So you really got to think about, what can only I do? What can I delegate? And you got to delegate. Okay, so we talked about this yesterday. Know your resources. You have to be willing to ask people for help. You have to be willing to be flexible when they give the help. And if it's something that you cannot afford to be flexible on, my child became very clear to us that he required a very special diet. I'm allergic to wheat personally. And so when we first had heard about that there are different diet issues, we had my son tested. He needed a very specific diet, and it became clear that he did better when he was on a specific diet. So I couldn't hand over the preparation of his food to somebody else. That was our particular circumstance. That may not be your circumstance. It may help you out to have somebody cook the meals. But if you cook the meals, it may not be the things that you necessarily prefer. So you have to be willing to ask, and you have to be willing to be flexible on the things that you ask. Don't ask somebody to do something that you can't be flexible on, I guess is my advice. And of course, when you go to your resources and ask them for help, keep a sense of humor. Keep a sense of humor. They're not going to get it right 100% of the time. Don't allow that to add to your stress. This is meant to be something that reduces the stress. Okay, number 4, take time, make time. When you're going to have to make yourself a schedule, right? Or somebody's going to make it for you on the autism treadmill, right? The speech teacher is going to say, okay, here are the times that I'm available, and you can pick up amongst these times, or here are the times. So this is when you have to show up here and be ready to have this child, and it may not be a convenient time, right? And then if you're working with an OT, the OT is going to say, here's the time that this, and your therapists are going to be available at these times. You're going to have a schedule, right? So you're going to have to get good at making schedules. And when you make the schedule, or somebody hands you the schedule, we used to get handed a schedule from CARD. I should bring one of them in, because it took me a week to figure out how to read the schedule. And actually, that's not true, because the whole 5 years that we were doing therapy, I would have to ask questions about the schedule. So it took more than a week. It took me a week to be able to fake it. Let's put it that way. But when you're making the schedule, you need to schedule in fun time. If it's not there, it won't happen. I'm just telling you from previous experience, been there, done that. If you do not schedule it in there, it will not happen. And you know what? You can say, but there is no time. There is absolutely no time. I'm telling you, there is time, even if it's 2 minutes. There were times when my son was doing 40 hours of therapy where literally we would put in the schedule 2 minutes of random dancing. Have you ever seen the iCarly show when they do the random dancing? Well, I swear my family was doing that way before iCarly. You know, that when the last therapist would leave at 6 o'clock, and I would be cooking dinner, we would always put on some music, and my husband and my child and I would have 2 minutes of random dancing to shake the day off. And you got to have something like that in there that's fun, that you guys are all doing together. I shared yesterday that we eventually said that we were going to go to Disneyland one afternoon a month. One afternoon a month. We live in Southern California, so it's infinitely more possible for us. You can get a special pass if you live in Southern California. I know that isn't possible for everybody, but it wasn't so much. I mean, Disneyland is fabulous. Don't let me, discount that it was Disneyland. But what I shared yesterday was that part of the big thing was the amount of time in the car, that it was at least an hour and a half, usually 2 hours, because we were going in the afternoon and there was traffic. And that was time that we could spend together as a family. It was time that my husband and I could spend talking to each other. On the way down, we would talk about all the things, that we hadn't been able to catch up on, a lot of them having to do with autism, some of them having to do with finances, some of them just having to do with our lives in general. But on the way home, we would talk about our hopes and our dreams and our goals. Really good quality time. as important as getting to Disneyland and having the fun. So you gotta schedule it though. I can tell you that usually what drove us on scheduling it is that we would see my son once a month. He would have a half day at school. That they would just say, this is a minimum day because the teachers have to get together and have their teacher support meetings. And so we would get the schedule at the beginning of the year and say, okay, that's a Disneyland day because we can get there a little bit earlier. And my husband he works a job so that it's not 9 to 5 Monday through Friday. So he would arrange to have that day, whatever it was, off. And that is when we would go. Now, the school changed the schedule this year. And instead we have furlough days because of the economy, and there's no minimum days. And so we have had to schedule it on our own, and there have been a couple of months where we just didn't get there because it wasn't as cut and dried. I'm telling you, if it's not on the schedule, it will not happen. You've got to put it on the schedule. So make sure you schedule it. That's really the thing. You have to take time and you have to make time. Make your schedule. And you can do it in the way that suits you. We would take the card schedule that we would get and then we would add on to it. Eventually, I kept our schedules on the computer. I don't know that that was really the best thing for me. I used to have my schedule in green and Jem's schedule in blue and my husband's schedule in red, and we would, try to figure out where everybody needed to be and who. I don't know. Sometimes that was more confusing for me than anything else, but, whatever works for you, but you got to have a schedule. Number 5 in stress reduction is move. We have to move. We have to incorporate movement into our day, and we have to include our children. If our kids are going to be doing therapy, and they'll be fairly active doing therapy, but they're not going to be as active as the kids who just get to play all day long, and the moms, that life that I never experienced, the moms who are like, wake up in the morning and go, okay, we're going to make breakfast and then we're going to the park, or we're going to the beach, or we're going wherever for the day, or we're going in the backyard and we're just going to dig. I didn't have that life. My son was in therapy. And we went to the park, but to do therapy, right? And we didn't have a backyard then because we were in a little teeny tiny condo because that's what we could afford, and still have me be at home so that we could do therapy, right? So our kids have to get active. When a child is properly tired, not worn out, but properly tired from good physical activity, they are much more compliant, they're happier, and they're going to lead happier, healthier adult lives. So we have to move, and we have to do the best thing that we can. There were days, quite honestly, the condo that we were in, it was like a train station. It had one room that was really long and thin, and there were days when we could not get out to do the things, and my son was having safety issues, and so my son and I would jog back and forth in the room, and there were times when I would say to him, you got to touch the walls 100 times, so he would run back and forth 100. We have to move, and it's best if we can incorporate it with our children. I've shared before that eventually we would watch The Last Airbender, and my son and I would sit together and be Aang, and we would meditate together. We have to make it reinforcing for ourselves. This is the one that's the hardest for me, by the way. The personal moving, right? I talk about it all the time on the show. But I'm walking every day because we got the dog, and now it's reinforcing enough for me. So we have to make it reinforcing for us, and we have to make it reinforcing for our kids. And my child is loving walking the dog. It's a really, really fun thing. And the dog doesn't let me forget. Talk about putting it on the schedule. The dog is right there in my face every morning at 5:45 going, hello, I need to walk now. It's like this. Hello. Okay, so those are the first 5. We've got 5 more for you. We're going to take a short break and come back and do those 5 really quickly. So stick with us. We're talking about reducing stress. Welcome back to Skills Live, and we've been talking about ways to reduce stress. We have 5 more ways to go through because we were talking about 10 different ways, all of which are completely free, right? And are going to help us to manage our stress, which in turn helps our kids to manage their stress. So our first 5, just to recap here, we said that you got to breathe, that's absolutely essential. You have to delegate, you have to be able to know your resources, you have to take time and make time, and you got to move. So number 6 is meditate. And, there have been lots of different studies done on meditation. It involves being able to breathe, which I think is a really important part of it. But I had said to you the other day that I think it's absolutely essential that we all are able to just go to white noise, even if it's just for 2 minutes a day. You know what I'm talking about? Like just total, like there's nothing else going on. I know it's really hard to turn it off, but when we can get good at turning it off and just taking those couple of minutes, it is good for our entire body. It's good for our heads. It's good for us. It's good for our kids. It's something that we can make exciting for them. I just shared that after we watched The Last Airbender on Nickelodeon, and there's a little boy who on that show, Aang, he meditates on a regular basis, and we get to see him in all the different funny situations, and my son saw that and really liked it, and so we started meditating together. And if you can imagine a little 5-year-old with autism, and you would think, okay, that's just not possible. And I would have said to you, okay, it's just not possible, but we would sit there, and sometimes it would only be a minute in the beginning, but you know what? He actually liked it. He actually liked it. So I know that it is possible. It may be difficult, and maybe you start doing just 30 seconds with your child, but you find at least 2 to 10 minutes to do it on your own some other time, whether it's that you do it right when you're laying in bed. And I want to tell you that when somebody said to me, you got to meditate, and I said, I don't have time, I don't have the money to buy a tape, and they said, no, go online. There's all kinds of free meditations online, whether it's on iTunes, you can download those, or it's on, you can find different sites that they do guided meditation that you can turn it on and sit there and listen to it, and they help you to clear your mind, and they play some fun music in the background. It's so worthwhile. It's so worthwhile. It will help you to be able to deal with the things that are coming and the things that have happened. You owe it to yourself. And we always say that we're modeling for our children, right? And we know that our children are going to have issues with stress and anxiety. Set the example. Meditate for yourself. I had to do it, and it was so much better. Number 7 is prioritize sleep. I've talked about this with you guys a lot. If you are underslept, and you probably are, right? They had a statistic a couple of years ago about something like 87% of Americans were underslept. And the criteria for being underslept was that if you sat someplace that was quiet and peaceful for more than 5 minutes, you would automatically go to sleep. That means you're underslept. If you're finding yourself trying to meditate and going to sleep, it's okay, especially if you're doing it right before you go to sleep, it's okay, but know that that means that you're underslept. You got to prioritize the sleep. And this is a great thing to prioritize and say to your core group that you're going to delegate to, you know what, I need somebody to come over so I can take a nap. You're worth it, and your child is worth it, and you will be a better parent if you are not underslept. It really comes down to that. And that you need to be as inflexible as possible about when you get to bed. This is hard for me too, but I've had to be better in this last year since I've been here doing this. Because before I would say, when I was working from home, I would be working on something and it would get to be 11:15, and I would think to myself, I should go to bed. And my husband would say, you should go to bed. And I would say, I know, I'm going, just a minute. And then it would be 12:15, and I would think to myself, I should go to bed. But if I just spend 15 more minutes on this, I can get it done. And then suddenly it would be 2:15. And the rest of the week, I would find myself being really crabby, not having the capability to deal with things in the proper way, because we talk when Evelyn Gould is here, and we talk about establishing operations. And, if we're starting out with something else on board, being underslept, we are not as capable. I am not Superwoman, and I cannot be as patient as I need to be on 4.5 hours sleep. I would love to lie to you and tell you that I can, but we all know, especially my husband and my child know, it's a lie. It's a lie. So we need to be as inflexible as we can possibly be. And if that means, the only time that we should have any flexibility with our sleep is if our child is awake and we need to attend to our child. But if your child is not able to sleep for a period of time that allows you to sleep, then that has to become the first thing that you have to target. Getting your child to sleep so that you can sleep. I'm sorry, it comes before everything else, and that is a topic that we will be talking about tomorrow. Getting your child to sleep, because you have to get to sleep. Now, the other part of this is, and I know having been there and done this, is that the first thing when we started even our parent training before we started ABA, they said, what do you want to target? My husband and I put our heads together and went, the sleep thing, because we all knew I was about to be not okay. Seriously, I was so underslept. And then my son, within a week, started to go to sleep much earlier. And instead of going, oh, good, I can get some sleep, I went, oh, good, I can get more done. Sorry. Right? Wrong answer. And so I'm going to tell you that I made that mistake too. And once we get your child to be sleeping on a regular basis, you have to go to sleep. I know those things will still be there tomorrow and the day after. Delegate. Or just it doesn't get done. Right? If your house has to be the next 3 years messier than it would have been normally, you know what? Life goes on. But the sleep has to happen, or you're not going to be as effective, and you will get sick. Been there, done that. Okay. And number 8 is to download. We talked about this earlier, that one of the reasons why I like the question on Facebook is it gives you an opportunity to download. You have to have somebody to talk to. And it might be that it's a good friend. It might be that it's your journal. It might be that you start a blog online. Both Blogger and WordPress have blogs that you can do, and you have the choice of making it public or private. You don't have to put it out there for everyone. You can sit there on a regular basis every day and go, I am so mad at autism, right? You won't frighten me. And you can make it public, and we have lots of mommy and daddy bloggers out there, and we're going to be sharing more of them on a regular basis. People who have found a way to use what's going on in their life and download it and get it off their plates, right? But there are just as many people who push the private button and don't share it with us. Whether you decide to make it public or not, and if writing is not your thing, find something else to do. You have to have a way to express the feelings, to express the grief, to express the anger, to express the disappointment. And you want to be able to put that in a place that's safe, not on your child. Right? It's not their fault. So you don't want to put it on them, but you need a place. You are angry and you are disappointed and you're frustrated. If you're not, I can't imagine how you couldn't be at some point on some day. It's okay. It's okay to have those emotions, but don't let them fester. Find a safe place, somebody that you can say, I'm ticked. I'm ticked. I'm not happy about this. Certainly writing was a thing that was really useful to me, and I really loved that because I could get it on the paper and I could look back at it and go, okay, well, that's not pretty. You know, and then it's gone and it dissipates into the universe and you don't have to look at it again. Whereas if you're talking to somebody, sometimes they'll say, oh, remember when you said that? You know, sometimes for me that doesn't work as well. But whatever works for you, but you've got to find a way to download all the things that you're feeling and be honest about them. And I have to be honest that while it's great to be able to download a little bit with your significant other, I don't think that that's entirely the appropriate place to consistently download, especially the really ugly stuff, right? That can be damaging to a relationship. Find a place to download that's safe, that doesn't come back at you, that you don't have to, you know, there's no repercussions for it, is my advice to you. Number 9, we were talking about this before, laugh. You must laugh. You gotta have a sense of humor. Laughing is a healthy thing. It releases hormones. It exercises muscles. It is so helpful. You know, I was thinking about this last night that in the beginning, I remember probably in the first 2 weeks that my son was diagnosed, and while we were in this waiting phase and not having anything else to do, I remember there was one rainy day here in Los Angeles, and my husband and I were both home and overwhelmed, and we sat down and watched a marathon of Triumph the Insult Dog and laughed so hard. My husband will get to the point where he giggles. He laughs so hard. We laughed until we cried, and then we hugged each other and cried. But you know what? You got to have that big belly laugh. It has to happen, and whether you can do it together or do it separately, find something to watch online, whether you watch Funny or Die or whatever it is, you have to laugh. And it doesn't necessarily have to be at autism, although you will get to that if if you're really exercising mental health, you will get to the point where you laugh about the things that are happening in your house. Okay, number 10, and this is the hardest one of all, but practice forgiveness. And you got to forgive yourself. You got to forgive your child for their behaviors, because it's not their fault, right? You have to forgive yourself for mistakes that you made along the way. You have to forgive your partner. You have to forgive everybody who along the way let you down, because people have and they will, because they're human, and so are you. I think that the forgiving yourself is one of the hardest things, because I know even now, did you hear me this morning when I was saying, well, I should have noticed this and I should have noticed that? It's a daily thing. I don't know that you ever get to the bottom, but daily I try to say to myself, you know what? I'm human. I'm doing the best I can. I got to forgive myself for the fact that I am not perfect, because guess what? I'm never going to be perfect. That day is not going to happen. You got to forgive the world for the fact that they don't understand it, that they don't get it, right? And again, that's a daily. Sometimes I get mad. I'll see somebody and go, really? That's how you're going to react? Really? And I have to get to the point where I go, you know what? That's your ignorance. That is your ignorance. You don't know what I know. Bless your heart. Bless your heart. I'm glad you don't know what I know. I'm glad you haven't had to go through this with your child. Now go away. I don't want to deal with you right now, but I forgive you for your ignorance, right? And again, keeping that sense of humor, and also forgiving yourself for your circumstances. Yep, you don't have enough money. Guess what? No one does. Yep, you made a mistake. Guess what? We all did. Forgive yourself. You deserve some forgiveness. This is not your fault. Yeah, you might have done some things that didn't help. We all did. I'll give you a hug. Welcome to my world. I have too. There's a phrase that they use in NASA. It's not the prettiest phrase, but and since my son, we're space people. I like the whole space thing, and my son likes the whole space thing. But there's a phrase that they call about somebody screwing the pooch, and from time to time, you're going to do that. You're going to do that. Welcome. It's all part of the game. You're going to make mistakes. I forgive you for being human. Now you have to forgive yourself. And I have to forgive myself, because that's a part of the stress. We think that we're supposed to know everything, be all places, be everything to all people. Guess what? It's not going to happen. And we need to forgive ourselves for it. I like to use the phrase that I want to be superwoman, I want to be super mom, but my cape keeps getting caught in the fan. Oh well, let's have a sense of humor about it. So forgive yourself, and try to forgive everyone else around you too. Chances are, and I know there's some people it's hard, right? Some people it's a little harder than others, but chances are they got something that they're working against and that we don't even know what it is. So, and much better to forgive them and move on. We can get into the action. Going back to the first one, which is breathe. Forgive yourself and breathe. We're going to reduce this stress one thing at a time.